Hey, it's a bit unusual for this podcast, but here's a short preface. This conversation was scheduled a few times, but we finally managed to record it. Yes, there are some audio issues, the sync and mic bleeding. I did what I could, but I couldn't completely fix them. However, I decided not to ask Michael to re-record it. I'd rather keep this episode's production as it is, because our conversation turned out to be truly interesting and enjoyable. Michael is a highly talented professional, and I'd love to share his experience with you.
Hey, it's me again and it's you again. My name is Vitaly and you are listening to Tysha, podcast about sound in games and movies. Today's episode is a bit different. We are doing it in English. I'll try to provide a Ukrainian translation later, maybe even use some AI magic for that. Who knows? Ukraine has a huge Call of Duty fan base. There are also a lot of Ukrainian developers, artists, and VFX specialists who've worked on the franchise. Just think of the Donetsk airport, Donbass arena, or the Easter eggs in Warzone subway. There is plenty of our influence in the series. But since this podcast is all about sound, today's guest is none other than Michael Caisley, lead sound designer at Sledgehammer Games. Hello, Michael.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Cool. So, Michael, if I got it right, you used to work at Sledgehammer, but you're not there anymore, right?
Correct. Yeah. Now I'm at 1047 Games. I was at Sledgehammer for about 10 years.
10 years. Cool. So we have a lot of things to discuss. So, Michael, let's dive in. First things first, great to have you here. It's really nice that we have this meeting, because we wait in it a lot of, more than 2 months. Yeah. I have this little tradition. Each guest picks an ambience that plays in the background during our conversation. Just name a location. Or if you want, send me your own ambience file. Just one rule, no forest or rain sound. We have already done those in previous episodes. You can imagine or choose something.
Yeah.
And I'll add it by myself.
I'm not sure. Desert, maybe. Day. Yeah,
okay,
maybe
cool.
Day with some light wind.
So imagine that we are in the desert with light wind in the day. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. I'd really love to start with Call of Duty. So could you tell me which projects you worked on?
So I did 3 with Sledge. The first one was Advanced Warfare in 2013. The second was Call of Duty World War II, which came out in 2017, I think. And then finally Vanguard from 2021.
Oh, nice. Look, I'm a fan of Call of Duty, and I got this tradition for about 5 years now, maybe. My friends and I have been getting together every Friday for a PlayStation Hangout, and we are playing Call of Duty.
Nice.
Yeah, with a lot of beers and sometimes with whiskey. Because without whiskey, you can't play Call of Duty.
It's true. That's a rule.
So I know you went to film school, so you had experience with sound, but not especially in games. Tell me more, please. How did you get into game dev?
Sure. Yeah, it was about 26 years ago, almost exactly. And my first job fell in my lap. It really did. It's kind of sad how fortunate I was to get it. I was in film school, but I wasn't specializing in sound. I was specializing in just film editing, right? And no interest really in sound. I mean, I had done a little bit of electronic music in the 80s, but I wasn't very good. So I don't know can I tell a long story?
Yeah, man, up to you. I said it before we started our conversation. Just imagine that we are in your kitchen with whiskey.
Right.
We can
With
talk.
whiskey, yeah.
Yeah.
When I graduated film school in, I think, 1998, and I'm in New York at the time, and there are really no jobs, so I'm working in retail, and then a friend of mine, like an old high school friend, calls me and asks me to be his best man at his wedding.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
it was great. And I flew to Chicago to do that. And while I'm there, he says, I've got this new job at a video game company as an artist. And he's like, I'll give you a tour of the studio. And you have to keep in mind, like the game industry it's not like it is today. It was very small, not very competitive. So it was a company called High Voltage. And so he shows me around. Now, this is the guy who I did electronic music with in the 80s. Like, he and I were in a little band. And he had continued to do music. I really hadn't done that so much. But he had continued to do music, and he'd even written a couple of pieces for, I think it was Tempest was the game that he had just made. The Tempest remake that came out in 98, I think. Or 97, sorry. And so I'm like, oh, that's cool. And he showed me his little office, and he's got the keyboard, the synthesizer there, and a couple of racks. And I'm like, oh, this is really neat. And he's like, yeah. And so that happened. The wedding happened. I flew back to New York. And then 6 months later, he calls me again. And this time he says, the company wants me to start an audio department. Do you want to join me?
Yeah.
And I'm like, sure. Like I said, I knew nothing about sound. But I was like, hey, it beats working in retail, right? It's a career. It could be a career. So I accepted, and that, that's kind of how I got into it. And, there were some growing pains. I think I'd always been kind of like a creative person. And so whether that was in film editing or then sound, right? I think that skill transferred over to sound. And then as I was designing sound, I was, in my head, I was, innovating and trying different things already out of the gate, even though maybe the quality of the product wasn't amazing early on.
Yeah.
But that's how I got my...
And before you started creating sounds for games, did you work on sound for movies?
No, I did sound for television for about 2 years.
Oh, television. Oh.
Yeah, so I started at the company with my friend Eric, right, High Voltage. After 2 years, I decided I wanted to work in TV or film. And so, I moved to LA and started working at Fox Family on cartoons. Did that for 2 years until Disney bought Fox Family, and then everyone was fired. So, and I couldn't find anything at all. So I went back with my tail between my legs, went back to High Voltage, and then worked there for another 4 years.
And look, that was a really important question. I think back then you didn't yet understand the difference between linear sound and game sound. For example, sound in movies and TV shows is different from games, because in games the player interact with other players and with some environment,
Right.
some items, something else. And you didn't know about that at the time, did you?
Well, I think in my mind, they were very similar. So, like, when I started in games, my headspace was that what I was working on was similar to film, but with sound. And I kind of approached it that way, which is why I went to work in TV, and it was great. And then when I came back, that's when I really decided to focus on the interactivity of audio. I think the first couple of years I was just, I was making sound effects, but I it was a very simple game. It was Lego Racers, the name of the first game I worked on. And the implementation was very simple back then. Very little memory. So it's not like a game today where you have all these, sound systems running at one time at runtime. It was very, very simple. It was just trigger sound, very simple. So it wasn't really that much of a culture shock going into TV. It felt kind of natural, and then coming out of it, I actually decided, okay, I need to know more about implementation and interactivity, right?
Okay. So, and what exactly do you do at Sledgehammer? I'd love to hear about the workflow. How big is your team? Do sound designers also handle implementation, or do they mainly focus on creating content?
Sure. So Sledgehammer, the team size changed over time. Advanced Warfare was very small. I believe there were 5 of us, including the audio director. So it was a very small team. And we did our own implementation. So at Sledge, there's no middleware. There's no Wise or Fmod, right?
Whoa. I have a question about it. You use your own custom game engine, yeah?
Yes. It was a modified Quake engine, but heavily modified.
Whoa,
Heavily modified.
interesting.
And we implemented through a script that was basically C. And so we did all of our own implementation. So I had to really quickly learn basic scripting, like very simple scripting, but enough that I could write little systems and functions to trigger sounds. But heavily sound. So we basically the idea there was you own your task from design through output, through implementation.
Understand. Yeah.
And as it went on, I gotta say, my audio director, Dave Swenson, he kind of recognized that I had that my strength was sound design rather than implementation. And so, when we get to World War II, and then especially in Vanguard, he kind of let me focus on that, right? And keep my head down, work on the content, and I would do some implementation, but I would also rely on other people to do it. So I was kind of spoiled a little bit over that time.
Yeah.
And the teams grew, so I was able to do that. So World War II was a pretty large team. I think it was including the dialogue department and programmers, it was, nothing now audio teams are huge, right? 15, 20 people. This seemed big at the time to me, and I think it was just 12 people. And so I was able to do that. I was able to focus, on just the content. And then, but that was a really strong team. Really.
Okay, so you had this practice called one-person army, yeah, or one-man army, where single specialists could create sound, design it, edit it, implement it into the game engine, work with audio systems, voiceovers, dialogues, and so on, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, sort of. We had a dialogue coordinator, so I actually didn't touch dialogue at all. There was a dialogue coordinator and an editor, and so they did dialogue, so we didn't touch it. And then our cutscenes were handled externally. But yeah, you had to be like, very self-sufficient. However, it was kind of stratified in that, like, people had strengths, So if someone was really good at ambiences, what's the point of giving an ambience to someone else if they don't want to do it, right? So there was a lot of that. There was a lot of that, yeah. So at the beginning, I focused on a lot of level, scripted moments and Foley and, big bombastic explosions and things like that. That's where I focused initially. And then by the time I got to World War II, I was doing all the weapons and, I did a lot of sounds for that game. Yeah.
I forgot in what part of Call of Duty there was sound like turret. Maybe it was Vanguard. And it sounds so boring. I have to know who is creating.
I don't know. I'm trying to remember the game. So was it one of the modern warfare games?
I think it was about 2 years ago. Maybe
2 years ago.
It's Vanguard, yeah.
I don't know who specifically made the sound. Most likely it was somebody at Infinity Ward.
Just let me know, please. Send this info for me.
Yeah, I'll find out for you.
Thanks. Personally, I work on content creation, audio systems, and some implementation. And we use a custom game engine too. But for sound, we rely on Wise. What tools do you guys use?
So where I am now, we have Wise and Unreal. As I said, like at Sledge, it was all proprietary. There was no Wise, there was no Fmod, no Unreal. Everything was very text based. Our database for sound effects was a spreadsheet. It was a CSV file.
Oh yeah. I understand, but a lot of questions, man.
Yeah.
A lot. I'm really curious about how you created the weapon sounds, gunfire, gunshots, reflections, how you switched between them, because in Wise you can use switch, state, or out of the box, and apply delay and reverb in real time. Did you freeze the reflections and reverb for
Well, so
gunshots?
the sound database is pretty much just a place where you have your sound event and then all of the associated wave files, right? Mm-hmm. And then you have the basic parameters, volume, pitch, the radius of the sound, things like that. Just very basic params.
You mean attenuation, yeah?
Attenuation, for example, yeah. It was all in there. And then we did all of the things that you can do in Wise now, we were doing in script. So we were changing reverbs, changing states and switches and things like that were all done in script.
Crazy.
After a while of doing that, it becomes it's the way you work. It's the way you like to work. And so, yeah, I actually enjoyed it.
Yeah, look, a lot of companies work this way now.
Mm-hmm.
Studios that use their own custom game engines handle a huge part of their tasks through text files, setting parameters in XML and so on. In the first episode of my podcast, I had Artyom Garun as a guest. He worked on weapon sounds and gunshots for Stalker 2. And now he is at Bohemia Interactive, working on a project... I forgot. They have armor and Daisy. So they also use a custom game engine, and a lot of sound work is done through text files. They don't switch to something more modern because I guess it would be extremely expensive in terms of time. It would take a huge amount of resources.
Right.
Those are big, long-running projects, massive ones, and rebuilding all those systems from scratch in something like Wise would take years.
Yeah, and we relied heavily on our audio programmer to create like low-level systems. So we could switch reverbs in real time, but things like reflections, that was like a system that was created like under the hood, like way under the hood, that just worked. So we had a series of sounds that were just for reflections, and based on environment, and based on not just environment, but like room size and whether you were near a surface, and they just worked because he had written the system for it. So we didn't have to worry about doing that in script at all.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Cool. So, have you ever been in a situation where sound had to save a scene or gameplay moment? Like when animations weren't super detailed or the effects couldn't have been better, but great sound design still made it work.
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, that happens all the time. Audio has to come to the rescue a lot.
Interesting, some VFX or 3D artists would listen my podcast.
I mean, Foley is a great example of that. I mean, if locomotion animations are very janky, as you know, at most places. And also systems like in World War II, we had a system that they added, a feature that they added very late, which was the idea that your teammates, not teammates, but your fellow soldiers, right, would throw you supplies.
Let's call them NPC.
The specific NPCs would throw you certain supplies. So there was a guy that would throw you a health pack, another guy would throw you grenades, etc., right? And obviously they had they'd made this feature, but they hadn't spent a lot of time on it because it came in very late. And so it was the guy would say, "Here's a health pack," and then the health pack would appear in your hand. And so we had to sell it with sound and cover the idea that he's throwing something and then it's flying through the air and then you're catching it, because by itself it was it was plain,
Yeah. Are you good at saying stop, or do you keep tweaking things until the last possible moment because you always feel like it could be just a little better?
Absolutely. I mean, to the point where a game will ship and I'll be like, oh, I wish I could have done that differently. I was very iterative, especially with weapons. I was never happy. Like I remember in World War II, just like the M1 Garand, which is like your default weapon, I think I did like 15 different iterations of that. I made a first, when the weapon was available, I'd make one, and then every once in a while, I had a lot of autonomy at Sledge, which was great. And then so if I felt like changing the sound, like I was totally free to do that. And so the weapons during the course of the 2 or 3 years would always be, I'd always have an idea and then upgrade them as I went. I was never happy with anything.
Okay, the next question is serious.
Okay.
But it's really important for everyone working in game dev. Burnout is a big deal. I'm sure you've faced it at some point over the years.
Okay.
So how did you deal with it?
Okay, sure. Yeah, burnout is real, and I don't know a good way to handle it, really, except to... The problem with me, and I think the problem with a lot of sound designers, is or just game devs in general, is we want to do our best. And so even if we're feeling a little burned out, we're going to push. You're going to push until you have to lay down for 2 days. And I think as I've gotten older, it's a lot harder for me to do crunch. So instead of crunching, I just try to, use my time efficiently rather than, working 7 days a week. Burnout, I don't think there's anything you can do about burnout. I really don't. I mean, you could just have a glass of whiskey and, sit on a beach or something. I've been affected by that, especially as I've gotten older. It's been really hard. And, but the last company I worked for before 1047, which I only just started 2 weeks ago, but before that I was at striking distance, and that was a really strange company because there were a lot of workforce changes, a lot of team changes after I'd only been there for a year. So a lot of people left, a lot of people were laid off, and they were very reluctant. I don't think they really cared about audio very much. And so they were very reluctant to backfill the audio people that had left. And eventually, probably about March of last year, while I think we were probably like 4 or 5 months away from shipping this game. It was like a roguelike. Not really my favorite genre, but... so they didn't backfill anybody. And it came to the point where I was the only sound designer. It was me and an audio programmer left. And that was one of the most physically and mentally taxing times of my life, because when you're the only one, it's like people become very demanding, when is this going in the game? They don't understand that you're the only person, right? So when is this going in the game? Well, it's going to go in when I finish the other thing that you wanted yesterday, right? And then you're in a lot of meetings, but you're also excluded from a lot of conversations, and so that was really frustrating. I was actually glad when they finally laid me off. That was a huge relief, and now I find myself in a really great place. But yeah, that was tough, and I mean, but there's nothing you can do. I mean, you just have to take it and do your best. And yeah, I wish I had better advice for game devs. I would say maybe, because like I said, we're all so passionate about what we do that it's not like you can switch off. It's not like at the end of the day I'm not thinking about sound anymore.
Yeah, I understand. I think it's impossible. Didn't think about audio.
Yeah.
I think the simplest way is to change your surroundings, change the situation, change your environment, switch up the ambience. Just step out of your studio, like you said, sit somewhere in silence with a glass of whiskey. That's a great idea. Look, I'm from a small Ukrainian town. It's called Mangush, near Mariupol. In Greek, Mangush means white bird.
Yeah.
But as you know, my homeland is currently occupied by Russian soldiers, and I can't go back to visit my favorite places. So right now we are living in Vilnius, Lithuania, and there are a lot of small, beautiful lakes here. Sometimes my family, my son, my wife, and I drive out to one of them just to walk around. It's a small lake, but just getting there taking a walk, drinking some tea or coffee from a thermos, and
Yeah.
listening to nature really helps me refocus on myself and my loved ones. It's a great way to disconnect from the outside world. But it's from my side.
I would say that working remotely is like a double-edged sword for burnout, right? So it's nice to have the freedom when you work remotely. It's nice to see your cat and your wife, but there's also, which I think is good and bad, right? Like sometimes I'll get an idea for something at like 10 p.m. and then I can go work on it, which is great in a way, right? It's nice to be able to do that. But when I used to work at a studio, if I left at 6 or 7 p.m., like that was it. I wasn't going back for any reason. So I think that's maybe you and I, working remotely are probably experience burnout a little bit more because we can't create physical distance between ourselves and the project.
Look, I tried working remotely, but it wasn't very comfortable for me. The first maybe about 6 months were fine. I don't know. Maybe because my son had just been born back then, and I needed to spend time with my family and help my wife. That was important, but it didn't allow me to work properly. So for me, it's definitely better to separate work from anything else.
Okay.
Right now, I work in an office, and each audio specialist, has their own studio. There is an open space outside the door, but in here, this is my castle. I can work in peace, play sounds at full volume, and thanks to good soundproofing, no one hears me and I don't disturb anyone. It's really cool. The biggest advantage, is having other departments nearby. I can just open the door and talk to the developers, through the artists, with fix specialists, or invite QI into my studio to discuss a bug. It makes work simpler and faster because we have good communication. No need to send an email and wait 3 days for a reply. Yeah. Okay, let's proceed. We talked about the past. Now let's talk about the present. What are you working on now, and what's next for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. After I left Sledgehammer in 2022. I took a job in Denmark at IO. I don't know if you know IO Interactive.
Yeah.
And worked there for just not even 6 months, I think. The reason being is it was just very expensive to live there, like extremely expensive, and so we just needed to come back, and that's when I took the job at Striking Distance. Now, the interesting thing about once I got to that point, I'd been in the industry for quite a while, like over 20 years, and a lot of people knew my work, and so I was able to join teams with where I could have a lot of sound design, focused autonomy. That's what they wanted from me. Like, we're hiring you because we want you to do content for us. And so that's sort of become, in the last few years, that's become my career. I'm still implementing a little here and there, and it's great. I love to do it. but it's not as expected of me. So now I'm working at 1047. I just started, and we're making Splitgate 2, which is an arena shooter. The first one was very popular. So, and it's nice. It's interesting working on a game without a campaign. You know, you can, and there's no music and not a lot of dialogue, and so you can just focus on weapons and abilities. So it's nice to have that space, you know. And we have a guy that does ambience and UI. Those are the two things I hate. I hate doing ambience. I hate doing UI. I know a lot of people really like ambience, and I get it. Just for me, doesn't interest me that much. And UI is one of those things that there are people that do it well, and I'm not one of those people. And so I like to leave it to the people that do it really well. So I've been able to just like, you know, I joined this place. It was a very quick turnaround. I think it was like less than a week where I interviewed and then accepted an offer from them. And because they, you know, they had a need and they saw that I was, you know, I'd been out of work for a couple of weeks. And so that's fortunately, you know, I'm very fortunate to have had this career, and to be at the point I am now is it's very nice. It's very comforting to know that people actually want you for the job, right? You specifically. So I think that's where I am right now. I'm in this kind of interesting, very fortunate role where I can just focus on the things I like to do.
Oh, okay. Cool. It's great that you feel comfortable, or at least consider job opportunities where you'd be. That's really important. So, if I got it right, you are living in the States now, and moving somewhere else wouldn't be very comfortable for you, right?
Yeah, I live in Idaho, and yeah, I was able to work remotely during striking distance, and my wife also at her job was laterally promoted to a team that was all remote. And so, because we were living in California and we really didn't like it. We didn't like California. And so once we were able to work remote, it was obvious. We're like, let's move up to the mountains. Let's live in Idaho. My whole family is in Idaho.
Uh-huh.
And so it's kind of a no-brainer that we just moved up here. And again, fortunately, you know, when you've been doing this a long, long time, people are very willing to accommodate you. So I always felt like, yeah, I'll get a remote job. It's not, you know, I didn't think it was a problem. And then 1047 came along, and they're an entirely remote company. Everybody is remote. It's an international team. Everybody's on Discord. We've got the little Discord cubicles.
Yeah,
where people can.
I get it. Look, our company has a lot of offices around the world. I work with people from Prague, from Chicago, from Japan. I forgot what city in Japan, in Germany, in Berlin. It's really interesting. Some of them work remotely, not from office.
Yeah.
But we have audio studios here in Vilnius, and there are also studios in Serbia. Thought I wouldn't want to move to Serbia.
I know little about Serbia, but it does have I don't know. It has a reputation, right, because of the movies, the Hostel movies. Are they not? Is that Serbia? I don't know. Yeah, no, I hear you.
That was a joke. Or maybe not. Honestly, I think from my perspective, from my side, switching jobs too often wouldn't be very comfortable. I know people who change jobs every year or every 2 years. They finish their tasks in one company and then look for the next opportunity. That's pretty convenient for developers and programmers. And if you are single, it's much easier to move to any country. Pick a cool location, live there, work there. It's great experience. But when you have a family, it's a different story. Moving becomes much harder, organizing everything, dealing with documents, and if you have a kid, that adds even more challenges. Finding a school, learning new language, socializing in a new environment, it's not as easy, and not everyone is ready to go that road.
Yeah.
Speaking of workplaces, take a developer, for example. They just need a laptop and they can get their work done, right?
Yeah.
But an audio designer, we can't do everything on just a laptop.
I mean, I have a story that's that touches on that.
Yeah, please.
During the late aughts and early teens, I was working at NetherRealm, and I made a few Mortal Kombats there. And then I kind of tired of it. I was there for 4 years, and I left. And I was it was interesting. I mean, that was the first AAA game I'd worked on at that point. But I still really wasn't, I wanted to work at on a big shooter or, a triple, a known, whatchamacallit, IP, like a known IP. And so I left NetherRealm, and I remember I actually applied at Sledgehammer for a job, and didn't even get like an interview. I didn't even get a phone call, and it was the same with a lot of places. And then a job came along, and this kind of touches on this idea of people who take contract jobs, right? It was a contract job at EA, at Visceral, to work on Dead Space 3. It was just a 6-month contract. And the really cool thing about that is that not a lot of people, it's like a small group of people that do these contracts and bounce around. So there wasn't much competition for the job, right? And so it was really easy for me to get. I just called them and they were like, yeah, come on over. And then I was married at the time, and I relocated to, my wife is in Chicago, and I relocated to the Bay Area for 6 months, which was rough, but I think it was worth it. But the reason it's worth it is because doing Dead Space opened the door for everything else that followed. It was that.
Yeah. It's investigation.
Yeah, it was the watershed moment.
Portfolio. Nice.
Right. So after I had finished there, I saw that Sledgehammer was still hiring, and so I applied, and I got an interview, and I got hired. Sometimes taking a job like that, taking a contract gig, can really push you over the hurdle.
Cool. Okay, Michael. That's a wrap for this episode, Michael. And
okay.
Huge thanks to you for taking the time. We've been trying to set this up since December 2024.
Yeah.
And we finally made it happen. Wishing you all the best. Just one more question. Do you have Instagram?
I don't.
You don't? Why?
I am not really on social media that much.
Okay. I found one YouTube channel with your name. There are only one video.
Yeah.
From Call of Duty some scene with bike, yeah.
You need to change it, man. Tomorrow, create new video, please.
Yeah.
I like to watch videos from experts in some disease, so it would be very interesting. I don't know why you didn't make some videos.
Yeah, if I can just say this before we wrap, I was thinking about doing that. I have a really strange way of working, which is it's very messy. I know a lot of people that, they set up their DAW with all their plug-in chains, and they get at all the levels. I just dump stuff in there immediately and just start sculpting and shaping. And so I was, for a while I was thinking, oh, maybe I write like a book, or maybe I do some how-to videos, but I just don't think I don't think people would really gain anything from them, because what I'm talking about is that would have to completely change how they work.
Oh, believe me, a lot of people interested in how to create some sound design. Look, a lot of people are really into the projects you've worked on, even if experts might not find it that exciting. Players are definitely curious about how to create sound design, how to score Call of Duty, Mortal Kombat, and Dead Space. So think about it. I'm definitely going to watch your videos.
Yeah, and you could promote me on your Instagram page.
Yeah, okay. No problem.
Okay, yeah, we'll see.
I just want to say thank you again. This episode turned out a bit shorter than my podcasts in Ukrainian. I'm really sorry that my English didn't allow us to have a more in-depth conversation. Sorry for that.
Yeah.
No, you did great.
Sorry for that.
No, your English is great. It's better than my Ukrainian. It's so much better.
Oh, yeah, agree. You're right. Thanks. So, thanks one more time. See you, and
All right.
be on call.
Thank you for having me. Bye.